All right. Thank you, Roland. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's workshop, the Norwalk Board of Education. This is Tuesday, November 1st, just about 7 to 10. I'm going to call this meeting to order. My name is Colin Hostin. I'm the chair of the Norwalk Board of Education, joined tonight by my colleagues, Sherry McCready-Brown, Larry Ludwig, Janine Randolph, our vice chair, Diana Carpio, secretary Godfrey Azima, and joining us remotely are Kara Bakey and Erica De Palma. We start tonight, as we do always, with our Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, and thanks as always to our young scholars for helping us lead us in tonight's pledge. For tonight's work session, we do have an exciting and very important update on the work that I would say has been keystone of our strategic plan on terms of equity and inclusion, as well as successes and future plans for our special education program. So to get us started, I'm going to hand it over to our superintendent, Dr. Strait.
Thank you, Chairperson. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. As Chairperson Hostin articulated, the workshop today speaks to a critical component of the work that we've been doing, particularly aligned to our strategic plan around equity, excellence, and inclusion. We've engaged in a number of transformational practices and work across the district to really support student learning, but most importantly, rethink the way we were engaging in the work to ensure that we were creating a learning environment that was inclusive for all of our students, despite their race, gender, ethnicity, and specialized services that they might need. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. McBride, who will be leading this presentation this evening alongside members of his team. Dr. McBride, before we begin, can you introduce a member of your team that will be joining us in this presentation?
Good evening, everyone. Excited to be here this evening. To greetings to the board, greetings to Superintendent Estrella, as well as the Norwalk Public Schools family and community. I am proud to introduce my team who have been working diligently in this work, specifically starting with Mr. Raphael Gorman, Mr. Nick Dua, Ms. Emily Morgan, Ms. Christian Smith, Ms. Carol Wiltshire, Mr. Alden Burnham, Ms. Diane Caladra, and Ms. Heidi. Pyramid, sorry, just left me. They all will be presenting this evening, specifically talking about the components of this work under the umbrella of equity, excellence, inclusion. So again, greetings. Today marks a very important moment as we are having the opportunity to really kind of communicate the work that's been happening for the past year, specifically related to our equity movement that we are creating here. One of the first things that has really grounded me in this work was the vision that Dr. Estrella has established with the collective input of the community in the development of the strategic plan. In that work specifically, there's this idea of equity embedded as the foundation, as the bedrock of the work that was significantly moved Norwalk Public Schools by making sure that all students within this district have the opportunity to attain a high-quality, equitable education. My clicker time. All right, well, we were glad that just happened. My title specifically speaks about this idea of excellence, equity, and inclusion. People often wonder, what is it that you do, Dr. McBride? What specifically is the work that you are working on? And so I'm glad that I have the opportunity to clarify and provide some context. When people think specifically about this role, they only see the word equity, and there are some misunderstandings around what this actually implies. The first title of my, the first word in my title is excellence. That is the priority. How do you obtain excellence? Is by ensuring that there is equity, that there is inclusion. I specifically am a product of equity. Growing up in Elizabeth, New Jersey, where my life prospects were not very great based upon my socioeconomic status, the neighborhood that I grew up in, it's only because of the fact that I had amazing teachers, amazing opportunities that afforded me the opportunity to become who I am today. I always had teachers tell me how great I was. I always had teachers challenge me and push me beyond my limits because they saw that I had the potential. And that has made all the difference. And that is why I am here. That is why this work is important, that we allow all of our scholars to know just how valuable they are, just how amazing they are, and just how gifted they are. So, again, as I introduced earlier, I want to kind of, under this idea of equity, my background has grown significantly. When I first began, it was just me and Ms. Diane Villardo. We were the only two equity department focused individuals. But now we have transitioned to identifying specific equity initiatives, this idea of testing and accountability led by Diane Villardo. We have the data and analytics team, which is comprised of Ms. Christian Smith and Mr. Alden Burnham. We have our school quality review by Ms. Heidi Perovich. Our workforce development led by Ms. Carol Wiltshire-Toff, as well as our brand new communications department, which is prioritized over Cynthia Dua, Emily Morgan, and Raphael Gorman. So I had the opportunity coming into this position to be a part of the collective conversation to develop the NPS equity statement that was created through the work of former and current board members, as well as Dr. Fergus from the Temple University, as well as some of our scholars, to really capture what it is we are intending to do in Norwalk Public Schools specifically. So I think it's important that we really kind of have our grounding of this conversation in our NPS equity statement. I know it's long, but I think it's important for us to take the time to specifically communicate what it says. The Norwalk Board of Education firmly believes in the potential of all students to learn and succeed. We support equity, diversity, and inclusion as fundamental values of our school district to ensure all access for all scholars. We stand united in respecting, keyword respecting, people of all backgrounds and identities, welcoming regardless of race, socioeconomic status, gender identity or expression, sexual orientation, religion, nationality, citizenship status, or disability. Our schools are safe and welcoming environments for all. We are dedicated to fostering authentic relationships with all members of our school community, including culturally diverse families, and will communicate with clarity and respect. To prepare our students to succeed in a multicultural global society, we support our schools in teaching the contributions and viewpoints of all people using culturally relevant curricula. Race, ethnicity, language, or socioeconomic status will not be barriers, keyword barriers, to accessing academic, socio-emotional, and extracurricular opportunities. The board believes that a high-quality school district provides equitable opportunities, policies, facilities, and experiences that produce meaningful outcomes for all scholars. So then we have a quick defining of the difference between equality and equity, as well as systemic equity. Equality is all students receive the same support, but traditional approaches have limited access and engagement. Equity is we provide extra support so all students have access and are engaged. Systemic equity is which we are striving for here in Norwalk Public Schools is we change the environment, curriculum, policies, and practices to create a system where everyone has access and is engaged from the beginning. And so I always kind of give a quick, quick anecdote of what the difference between equality and equity is. So currently on the board, we have about 7 people. And let's say currently, each of you have about $100. Each of you have $100, right? So let's say Ms. Sherry has $100, Ms. Mary Ellen has $100, Janine has $100, and Diana has $5,000. If I give each of you equally $100, who has the most money? Diana Carpio, because she has $5,100. I gave everybody the same thing, right? That's equality. But if I wanted Sherry, Miss Marianne, Miss Janine to have the exact same amount, I would have to give them more so they could get to where Diana is. That is equity. So our goal is not to just provide the same to every individual student, but to identify the specific needs of our scholars and then meet them where they are and provide them with the extra supports and resources to have an equal, leveled playing field. That is the work. So what it is, equity is each child receives what they need to develop to their full academic and social potential by being provided resources and opportunities and removing the barriers. These are some words you're going to hear constantly, removing the barriers that prevent access to learning. And so when I spoke earlier about the misconceptions that people have about equity, I wanted to make sure I clearly articulated what it is not. It is not lowering standards. There is a belief that if I alter anything to provide necessary supports and I'm somehow minimizing the quality that everyone else is giving. It's not lowering the standards. It's meeting kids where they are and raising the standards and expectations for all. It is not a deficit approach, where this is idea that, that they cannot do because of these barriers. It's the idea that they can do it. It's my responsibility to remove those barriers and push them in those areas. It is not choosing one group over the other. There's a belief that if I give you something extra, I'm taking away from a different group, and it's not fair. So that's another piece that people seem to think that if Dr. Estrella is a child who needs some additional supports, and I budget resources for her specifically, and not give it to Board President Hobson, then somehow I'm not equal. But that's not what it's about. It's about he already has what he needs. She does not. And she is the one who we're going to provide support with, as well as Mr. Hobson, based upon what he needs as well. It's everyone. It's not solely about race or socioeconomic status. When people hear the word equity, they automatically assume that we're going to have a race conversation. It's about Black versus white or Hispanic versus Black. This is very broad. So equity is specific student abilities, it's gender, it's sexual orientation, it's religion. There are various ways that we are different and diverse. And the idea is that no matter who you are and where you sit in this world, you still should have the access and opportunity to receive a high quality education, and that's what we're committed to here. And as I stated earlier, it's not synonymous with equality based upon the example that I provided to you. Dr. Pedro Noguera communicated this idea, and I thought it was very poignant because I think it speaks specifically to what we experience in education currently. Anyone who works in public schools knows that students arrive with different needs. Some of our students have experienced trauma, others are learning English for the first time, and others may be reading below grade level. It follows that our students will need different things in order to thrive and meet their full potential. Addressing the needs of all students is not easy, but that is the goal of equity in education, to treat our students the way we want our own children to be treated. That is the true meaning of equity, acknowledging students' differences and giving them what they need to be successful. It also means staying focused on outcomes, both academic and developmental. So prior to coming here, the district engaged in an equity audit that was created by and facilitated by the research team led by Dr. Fergus with the Temple University research team in late September of 2020. It ended in mid-December of 2020. As a part of the actual process, they gathered surveys from about 1,900 parents and community members. They conducted some focus groups, interviewed about a variety of people that included community members, administrators, teachers, and other school staff. And they identified areas of disproportionality in special education specifically, discipline, as well as gifted and honors / the AP program. So just as a quick refresher, some of the data that was identified dealt specifically with this idea of discipline, where you have on the left the current enrollment broken down by specific demographics. You have Asian, you have Black, you have Latinx, you have white, and you have others. That's it in terms of the actual enrollment. And then you see the student suspensions on the right-hand side that should be proportional. That means if you see one side, in order for it to be proportional, it should pretty much be represented the same on both sides. But if you look here, on the left, you see this in terms of enrollment for Black students, which is the yellow, orange color on the left-hand side. They make up about maybe 15, 16% of the population of students. But when you look at how many students or the individuals who are being suspended, you saw that about 32, 33% of the students who were being suspended were students of color or Black students. So that is disproportionate. Whereas you saw, for example, in Latinx, you saw about 52% of the students who were represented enrollment. The exact same amount was proportional to the opposite side about student populations, student suspension specifically. Students with disabilities, specifically special education. Here you see the enrollment for each individual group, the exact same demographics, communicate in terms of enrollment. Then you look at overall SWDs, emotional disturbance, learning disability, as well as speech and language as well. So from this, you can specifically see that there's an overrepresentation of Black students in emotional disturbance identification of about 22% compared to their overall enrollment of 15%. Meanwhile, other groups demonstrate proportional representation based upon the enrollment numbers within Norwalk Public Schools currently, except for whites in OHI, other health, the eye impairments are, with 43% identified as OHI compared to 25% enrollment. Then we look at the AP enrollment numbers. You see again, you see with advanced programming, you see that there is a overrepresentation of white students in advanced programming. 39% compared to their overall enrollment of 25%. Meanwhile, the other groups demonstrate proportional or underrepresentation. So out of this work triggered the emphasis being placed on how we are, again, providing the necessary supports and attention to level this playing field and provide the necessary resources and access that may not have been previously provided. And the vehicle that we utilize to provide this support is through our equity teams. Each of our schools have equity teams, and Dr. Ferguson and his team had worked specifically with each school identifying an equity goal around discipline, gifted and talented, or special education ed. Each school, based upon their identified goal, created a team of a variety of stakeholders, teachers, counselors, staff members, to put in specific structures that will support them in attaining their goal. They identified an area of focus, as I stated, whether it be around special education, gifted and talented, and more specifically, they developed an individual plan of action. So at my school, we are looking at reducing the amount of students who are being suspended. That became our target. And we are looking at increasing the amount of students of diverse backgrounds and more AP honors courses. That was my focus. Once we identified the folks in each individual school, they then had to develop a plan that specifically outlined what they were going to do. What are the structures they were going to create? And then more specifically, how are they going to monitor and track their progress to ensure that they actually met the goal that they had identified. So I provided a few examples of some of the goals that the schools have provided. And we have a list for every individual school has a goal. Every individual school has a team. I've had the opportunity last year to visit every single team at least once, maybe twice, as well as Dr. Ferguson and his team coming in to specifically work with these schools. And thanks to the support being provided by executive directors of leadership, every one of our schools have an equity goal embedded in their school improvement plan, which shows the commitment to equity. So today is about talking about how we are tangibly implementing structures of equity. What are the things you can actually physically see that are in policy, that are in our curriculum, that are in human resources, that are in operations? What are we concretely doing to show the work that's happening around equity? So that's one primary example, that every one of our schools has an equity goal embedded directly in their strategic plan. And they have to meet. And thankfully, they are excited about meeting. Every time I go, they already have their protocols in place. They know who's doing what, and more specifically, they're actually looking at data that they're tracking over time to see if they're going to meet their goal, and to make any adjustments necessary to ensure they actually do just that. So an example of a goal is by June 2023, the percentage of Black and Hispanic students exceeding projected growth by 20% or more in NWEA math reading will be, et cetera, et cetera. And then they work with their support team to make sure that that is attainable by the end of the year. Another concrete thing that we're doing is prioritizing professional learning for our staff members, building capacity around understanding what equity is, but more specifically, how does it come to life in our classroom, in our planning, in our interaction, in our programs at every individual school. So we partnered with Unbound Ed this year and last year as well. And their approach is grounded in the intersection of standards, content, aligned curriculum, and equity, which is essential for closing the gap. So what they do specifically is they help teachers understand, number one, standards, teaching to standards. What does that really look like? What does it mean to meet and exceed what the standard is calling for? And how do you plan for that? And then how do you plan for that? Through the equity lens. So how are you taking into consideration the children who are in front of you? How are you making sure that they see the representation of themselves in that planning? How are you incorporating strategies and philosophies that speak directly to their individual needs? So they focus on grade level curriculum, strategic support, as well as leveraging instruction to ensure all students have access. They also, one of the critical pieces is they help teachers unpack the critical role that beliefs play in instruction. So we all know that everyone will rise to the expectation that are being held for them. And so consciously or unconsciously, belief systems have a significant impact on student achievement. And when you are planning for students, if you are not having those high expectations, then we see students not reaching that mastery because they're not being, there's this idea of the deficit thinking we talked about earlier, or the empathy, oh, they can't do, so I shouldn't challenge them, I shouldn't push them, or not planning purposefully and intentionally, for those students in a way that they can meet those expectations. And so they also talk about how to identify what instructional decisions are you going to engage in to make sure that Godfrey Azima is able to master these fractions. What are the decisions? Are you going to provide him small group instruction? Are you going to incorporate operations that or word problems that he can access, but then also relate to what you're putting inside the word problem that he can associate with something he's actually experienced? Those are decisions that they help teachers think through as they are planning for a variety of learners. So this idea of professional support, and again, it's growing. Last year was our very first year. We had 120 teachers and staff members go through this process with the idea that we're going to constantly build upon this each year. We've begun this year's component of the work as well to extend that work, so that the idea is that we take a core group and we extend it out over time, utilizing turnkey strategies and supports. The next concrete structure that we have are the equity ambassadors. These are the individuals at each individual school who are engaging in professional learning that is led by the Equity Institute. And so these conversations are members of the Equity Institute or individuals who are just wanting to be a part of this movement, voluntarily engage in conversations and professional learning on how to, number one, specifically facilitate discussions at the school level, specifically to build culture. So Unbound Ed is specifically around the standards, curriculum, decision-making. Equity Institute work with the ambassadors to create a culture where we're having some difficult conversations, to unpack some things, but in order to create a community that is inclusive, that is welcoming, that is addressing all of the concerns that students are coming to us with, as well as addressing some of our implicit biases. So the equity ambassadors have engaged in conversations around social identities, implicit bias, racism, and culturally relevant pedagogy, with the idea that if they're able to have these conversations at the school level, they can be able to provide support to their peers around things that they may not even be aware of. And we do understand that some of these conversations are difficult, but that is the work. In order to change the mindsets and behaviors, we have to first acknowledge that they are there. And also, people seem to believe that implicit bias, there's only a certain group who has them, or they're the target of them. We all have them. Every human being has a bias, whether you're aware or not. And so it's not condemnation, it's not judgment. The idea is let's just acknowledge them, talk about them, and then try to figure out how we can address them in order to better serve our scholars. And that's the work that our equity ambassadors are engaging in through the Equity Institute. And their mission is specifically to develop innovative solutions for building more diverse, equitable, and inclusive learning professional environments. They focus on this idea of empathy and promoting cultural responsiveness to teaching about what it means to live or create an equitable learning community, which we know is needed not just in Norwalk, but everywhere today. So that's another concrete structure in place. I had the pleasure this past year to engage in a book study specifically around developing a potential policy around grading with equity in mind. So myself and I had a variety of stakeholders that included principals, teachers, students, board members, central office staff, union leaders, every individual stakeholder was represented in this book study that took us a year to complete, with the idea of first being able to engage in some research-based conversations about practices that create equity through grading that allowed us, that challenged many of us as well, our own philosophies about what grading is and what it is not, and why we do what we do as it relates to providing specific levels of importance on assignments, etc. So we engaged in the book discussion, chapter by chapter, with the idea that once we finish the book, we would review and assess Norwalk's actual strategies. And then we engaged in conversations around what particular things we feel were priority for us to consider to implement in Norwalk Public Schools that will be able to create some of the equity that we're talking about as it relates to grading. So that will develop our path towards equitable grading practices. So we concluded our study, and we will be making a recommendation through our social justice and ad hoc committee to the policy committee to put there are 6 currently that specifically speak to how we can eliminate some of those barriers that prevent students from achieving or does not represent their actual mastery of content and being held back based upon some historical practices that need to be potentially updated. So that is something that's going to inform a grading policy specifically with equity in mind as another concrete structure that we are engaging in. So just as a quick overview of the salient points from the book, equitable grading has 3 specific pillars. That grading has to be accurate, in that you have validity reflects in the student's actual academic performance. So whatever I earn, I earn. So it's if I get a 90, I show mastery as a 90. It's not involving extra credit, it's not involving homework. It's exactly what students do and represent through their performance is what they should receive. That is grading that is accurate. Bias resistant, so grades that are based on student work, excluding participation points, grades based on summative assessments, grades based on required content or student work. So when you talk about bias resistant, it eliminates some of the subjectivity that happens when people are graded. So we know that 5 plus 5 is 10, but if you're writing an essay and it said, and you don't like me specifically, even though I may have met the target, I may not get the grade that I deserve because there hasn't been a clear rubric established. Therefore, it's very subjective. It's inclined to potentially be biased. So we want to make sure that it's not biased through these measures. And then motivational. We want students to feel like they have the opportunity for redemption, to feel like they're inspired and want to learn through ownership as well. So when you talk about this idea, what motivates people? Knowing exactly what you want. Clarity is one motivational factor. Being able to grade based on standards. We talked about that earlier. Allowing students potentially the opportunity to retake and redo. So if I know that if I don't show up as my best self that day, and it's not representative of who I am, then I may have the opportunity to truly show what I am through a retake or a redo. So that motivates students, as opposed to, you got a 0, that's it, move on. So those are the 3 grounding principles of the book Grading Equity by Joe Feldman. Another tangible, concrete example of how we are actualizing equity are through specific programs that we have created. One being the My Brother's Keeper, with our mission is to empower our young men of color by providing them opportunity to build strong relationships with their peers and mentors, while instilling some core values of problem solving, critical thinking skills, and engaging in the Rites of Passage program that will support their social emotional development, commitment to service, as well as student achievement. You must have all three. The vision is that they're going to obtain these fundamental skills in order to become the future leaders that we want to see in a variety of areas of interest who are going to change the world. And so our core values are empathy, compassion, integrity, leadership, love, pride, resilience, and service. So every one of our middle and high schools have a MBK program that they do specifically at their school. Mentors should be meeting with their young men at least once a month, and then we also come together as a one community convening every single month as well to instill these specific core values while working on a specific project that involves academics as well as social emotional learning. There's also a program for our young ladies called My Sister's Keeper, led by Ms. LaShante James from Brown McMahon High School. Their quotes this year, she said, make sure I state, is there is power in our minds, in our unity, in our culture. If we understand that power, we will be limitless. Their vision is that the members of Norwalk Public Schools, My Sister's Keeper, will have an enhanced educational experience through connections with educators and community members as part of their village. Their mission is to provide young women with access, positive female mentors within their buildings and district, empower female students to uncover their natural talents and inner beauty, and to be an outlet resource to young women in their building and throughout the district. Their core values are integrity, personal courage, relationship, respect, and self-love. Something I'm really, really excited about this year is our new kickoff program for affinity groups. Because we have such diversity, because we talk about this idea of identities, we want to provide outlets for a variety of our scholars to have spaces to call their own, that they are leading, that allows them to have the opportunity to congregate, create programs, discuss issues that specifically address their individual needs. So affinity groups are a group of people sharing a common identity that gathers with the intention of finding connection, support, and inspiration. Our goal is to make sure that they're student-led, focused on student voice, and belonging. So we have a variety of groups already, such as the African American and Black, Hispanic, LGBTQ+, who will be engaging in these affinity groups, as well as developing their own impact projects and conversations. And we've been partnering with a variety of CBOs and agencies. I know Mr. Pennington and myself will be working with a specific parent group to develop our first LGBTQ+ affinity group. And that's happening in November as our first kickoff affinity group. We're also working with Triangle as well. Another tangible equity structure is our district-wide cultural events. We want to make sure we provide the opportunity for the diversity within Norwalk to be displayed, to be celebrated in one space as one district, one community. We had our very first Hispanic Heritage Festival where all of our schools came together to highlight the amazing contribution and achievement of our Hispanic American members. And so we will be having 4 events this year. Our next one will be our African American declamation, presentations and speeches happening in February. We will be celebrating our amazing women in March through our sister circles. And then in June, we're going to end the year with our individual school pride parades. So we are making sure that we are creating a space and the opportunity for all individuals to be celebrated. And if there is something that's missing, we welcome those ideas and the opportunity to create a space if there is a need. Curriculum. How are we making equity tangible in curriculum? Lesson planning is the priority currently right now for us. ensuring that our teachers and our school leaders are providing access to all of our learners by deliberate planning for a variety of learners. I always say, I feel bad for my students when I was a teacher, because literally there was one lesson plan and either you got it or you didn't. There was not a priority on differentiation, there was not a priority on scaffolds. It was, I'm teaching it, I can sit down and help you individually, but there wasn't a concentration on, number one, utilizing data to support your planning, or number two, thinking about how you're supporting a variety of learners. But we have embarked on professional learning for our teachers, our school leaders, and prioritizing the belief, number one, the idea and the expectation that every student should be planned for deliberately. Our schools are also incorporating culturally relevant texts and pedagogy based upon also, again, the professional learning being provided by Unbound Ed as well as the Equity Institute. SRBI division supports, scaffold supports are embedded, and more specifically, the focus of utilizing data to provide individual supports and strategies to meet the need of all learners. And I know I've said a lot. So now, and after each one of us presents, there will be the opportunity for questions that you may have for us as we transition. But I do want to say that the last bullet is the segue into the work that's actually happening and why this team is really kind of coming together, because of the data-driven culture that we are creating now. Data provides us with the information that we need to be, again, deliberate and intentional with how we are planning for all learners. It's giving us information that helps us to inform our practice, but also make adjustments as necessary in the system itself, and then also in our instructional classrooms.
It's really exciting work. I just really want to thank you and your team for what you guys have been engaging. Just sitting here, the motivation and the chills I get of seeing the drastic changes happening in the district as we speak. It's great. This is really exciting to see and even more to be part of. The question I have, in terms of lesson planning and how we're integrating a more culturally appropriate curriculum, are we measuring the effectiveness of the lesson plans and curriculums chosen, separate from our current targeted outcomes for growth, or do they intersect in a certain way?
Well, they definitely intersect. But then I've also been in conversation with Mr. Pennington about doing a curriculum audit, similar to everything else we've done, to kind of see where our strengths are, and then areas of growth, so we can make sure that we are supplementing those gaps where necessary.
And the second question, I know the students are going to really experience some of the dosage of this work in the classroom, but how are we preparing our students to anticipate the changes that you just walked us through when they go to school? You know, understanding that last year as a sophomore, coming to class this year as a junior, there's some drastically different approaches and content in front of them. Are we giving kids a heads up or preparing them to really go through this change with us?
I don't necessarily know if they need a heads up. I think they'll be able to see and experience the changes based upon feeling like now I can see myself represented. Now I have access to learning that I did not have before as a result of the changes that are being made in planning or in being delivered with providing specific texts that engage them in very different ways.
So I'm glad to see what you're doing. As you know, I'm interested in disproportionality. We've had lots of discussions about that. And so if I read that correctly, are you looking at 2023 and thinking that that number will decrease?
Which
In
one?
terms of the Black students who are being suspended more than their percentage they are represented in the district.
So, and I don't know,
So,
Ms. Fagos would like to jump in, but so basically we have embarked on a revision of our actual safety task, we engaged in safety task force, where we're actually putting in protocols now to ensure that there are universal systems of implementation to accurately portray what's happening in our schools, which may not have been previously a part of what's happened.
Sure.
So
Sure, I can jump
can
in.
add on, but one of the things that we wanted to make sure as we redesign, and Ms. Fayos can speak about the behavior intervention protocol, we also wanted to embed practices that created multiple layers of review before a child was suspended, and making sure that processes across the system were not only equitable but uniform in practice, because we saw a lot of discrepancies. And this year, we've embedded a lot of those, but I'm gonna let Ms. Fayos speak to those, because that was a big chunk of the work that her department.
You're stealing my thunder, so
I'm
actually,
sorry.
no, don't be. Actually, our work for the safety task force, that's actually, our first meeting is November 3rd, is actually going to be around this precise topic, so I'm happy to have a preview here. But we have embedded some practices to actually have some reviews of the suspension data, because we noticed the disparities in our suspension data. And also because our suspension data is closely linked to our absenteeism data. So it really just does impact more than just our suspension data. It really impacts how students are being negatively impacted overall. So we have put in place an OSS site where students can actually attend school while they're in suspension. It's fully staffed. It started this week, so we're very excited about that. And then we put in place a process by which we are actually approving suspensions to make sure that we are not misusing the suspension guideline, because there's very specific guidelines for how a school can have out-of-school suspension. And so we have to just adhere to the law. And then there's some very specific laws where a student has to be put out. So we've put in place some practices to hopefully alleviate the overrepresentation of certain groups within the suspensions. But we also want to just support schools in actually managing behavior. I don't want to say that with a negative connotation, but just creating environments where students are more engaged and feeling better supported. So I do want to state that we have to also have a responsibility to support students that are staying in school, right?
And one of the correlations that we saw through some of this embedded work was that schools that had a large percentage of students that were engaging out of school suspension, their chronic absenteeism rates were much higher, because when the child is out, they're absent. And we wanted to make sure, and usually the students that were being suspended were kids that were most at risk. And we don't want to create a situation that continues to exacerbate the challenges that are already present. So that's where the suspension site was created, in an effort to ensure that despite a potential out-of-school suspension, students were still getting educated through that process.
So typically, as far as what, I might not be able to say this, but are there any things that you see? So you mentioned absenteeism seems to be something that is represented in students who are suspended. Are there any other markers, like any other family or any other
So,
things that you see?
Let me just rectify that, it's, because a child is suspended, it increases chronic absenteeism. There's not a direct correlation with kids that are suspended with having a history of chronic absenteeism. They develop it as a result of being suspended.
And so some correlations are that students that tend to get suspended tend to be disengaged. If you look at dropout rates, if you look at that demographic, you will see the disparities that come with that. Are students tend to have negative incidents in their career at some point. So there is a correlation between suspension and disengagement. There's a correlation between absenteeism and disengagement. And so we're trying to get at that also.
And also like making sure that we set up processes that extend beyond the suspension, right? Because when you look at many of these cases where there's recidivism, obviously the suspension didn't work. So making sure that we provide the social services aligned with also providing them with academic opportunities during that time become critical. So I know Ms. Rios is gonna speak in great depth to that,
On
with the safety
Thursday.
task force,
But I can share the
but you can share
presentation.
some
I can.
resources with.
Okay. Thank you.
In terms of our set, sorry, let's jump someone else with a question.
Yes.
Sorry, I do it all the time.
I also want to make sure that Erica and Kara, if they have questions, because I can't see their hands up.
My question is about disparity also, but in another area of academic excellence. Are we, with our study on equity, certainly there is not enough children of color in AP, in gifted classes. And I'm wondering how you're going about improving that. I'm sure your eye is on it, and has some improvement already occurred this year?
Actually, there has been some significant improvement. So that was specifically some goals for individual schools. And they reviewed their process for identifying students as a primary key indicator of making some adjustments. Being very targeted about who they're looking at and recruiting specifically students and parents as a part of the actual program. So,
And parents, could you unpack that a little bit?
so for example, there may have been some students that they overlooked or had not had engaging conversations with those individual students or families about, Thomas he has the potential, he's doing X, Y, and Z. I would love for him to consider becoming a part of this particular class, or looking at your actual process and saying, well, this particular thing is a barrier that's preventing a lot of students of color or students or girls or whoever from being admitted into our actual AP Honors program. And so those are conversations they're having at the school level in order to meet their specific goals.
So they're having conversations.
Oh, yes.
About expanding.
Ironically, I know,
Expanding of creativity and giftedness.
yes.
So that's a good thing to do.
Absolutely. Ironically, when I first came last year and I looked at a lot of the goals, most of the schools had that one as the priority, and we wanted to make sure we highlight that. And so then I said in quite a few schools, I think even here at Marvin, they were talking about what does giftedness really mean? What does it look like? And how can it go beyond just the academics? They were talking about how do we acknowledge giftedness in, music or the arts as a way of being even more inclusive of their program. So it just varies from school to school.
I think that's a really key notion of the whole equity process. It's really looking for everyone's gifts and finding ways to develop whatever their gift is, wherever they are. So that just blends really well with my thinking to make the world a better place.
And I think the beauty of this now is that schools are actually they're conscious of it. They're actually taking the time to engage in the conversations and even reviewing their own practices, which is a wonderful start.
And I think one of the misconceptions that or the notion that sometimes people have is that, because we're allowing certain groups of students into the program is diminishing the ability of others to get in. And what we found in the data, particularly last year, we were looking at Tracy, the same percentage of students that within certain subgroups that were disproportionately getting into the program while others were not, still remained the same, yet access to students that were disproportionately at low ratios getting into the program had increased significantly. And that's part of what we want to see. We want to see that regardless of parent advocacy to get into programs, that all students have equitable access to these programs, and to make sure that when we have our educators that play a significant role, particularly in the elementary school grades, are providing input, that they're really looking at the process holistically and making sure that their own implicit biases are not getting in the way of how they are recommending students for a program, for a different program.
And now I'd like to turn it over to our first team member.
Oh, one last question. In your presentation, regarding the sense of belonging, that was touched on. Have we identified tangible benchmarks, that measure how we're doing in establishing this culture of belonging in our schools?
That's what we're doing in our social justice committee.
I just wanted to have the public hear about it.
Okay. Kara has a question.
Yeah, hey, everybody. So I had a question. I'm not sure who might be able to answer this, but I realized that the city of Norwalk just hired its first DEI officer. And I believe her first day was actually today, Ms. Latoya Fernandez. And so I'm curious to know if there's been any discussions yet around ensuring that we are aligning with the city with whatever their plans may be there, and how we can leverage this new position.
So there's a meeting with myself, Ms. Fernandez, and Mr. Lamont Daniels, I believe, on Friday. So we will be having conversations about how we will be collaborating.
That's great. That's really good news. Thank
Right
you.
now, I'll turn it over to Ms. Diane Pilardo to talk about testing and accountability.
Good evening, Dr. Estrella and Board of Education. Tonight,
I think you guys need to speak into the mic because we can't hear you.
tonight we're going to just talk about assessment, literacy, and accountability. And unlike most presentations, there's not going to be a lot of data, but there will be concepts, basic concepts that we will cover. Thank you. Thank you. So here's a list of major state and local assessments that we use in the district. And you're familiar with many of them. We've had presentations a couple of months ago on Smarter Balance results. The state assessments are used as part of our accountability system. And local assessments are used to make decisions throughout the year. The results are used to make decisions about instruction and learning during the school year. Typically, state assessments are given once a year. They're usually at the end of the year. Local assessments are given either 2 or 3 times a year. And the purpose of any assessment is to gather relevant information about student performance and progress. But the objective of assessments is to develop a deep understanding of what students know, what they understand, and how they can apply their knowledge. If you wanted to find information about state assessments, there's a Connecticut portal. And in that portal, there's a centralized reporting system. And that's where you would go to find detailed results about student results. Last links, there's another portal called the DRC portal, where you would go for results. The College Board has a portal where you go for SAT results, PSAT results. Likewise, NWEA has a reporting board. These are sophisticated portals. Amplify has a portal for reporting DIBELS results for early literacy progress of our students in grades K through 3. So what we have are multiple data points, very valuable information, but they are in silos, and this can be a problem. This could be a deterrent when we want to do data analysis broadly using multiple types of assessments. But this is what we've had for many years. Now, there's not one assessment that answers all the questions and has all the information that we need. This is a graphic of 3 major types of assessments. The summative assessments are the ones typically at the end of the year after learning has occurred, are state assessments. that are given after learning takes place. Benchmark assessments are given periodically throughout the school year. We give typically benchmark assessments in the fall, and those are really used to determine which students are at risk, which students may need intervention that school year. Then we give additional benchmarks in the winter and in the spring. And those are really used to track gains in achievement and also to measure growth. And you've heard reports on NWEA, which is a typical benchmark assessment that we use. But there's a group of assessments. They are frequent, quick, and informal, called formative assessments. And this takes place during learning and teaching. It's really valuable for teachers because teachers know in real time what they need to do to adjust instruction in order to improve outcomes for all their students in the classrooms. It can be as simple as observing a conversation between two students or just asking questions in the classroom. Very informal, but it's a way for a teacher to determine what students need immediately to reach their learning goals in class. And so here we have a descriptor of the benchmark assessments. Again, during the school year, it could drive decisions or make revisions to plans. And finally, the formative assessments. And when we think about summative assessments, some summative assessments, it doesn't necessarily have to be state assessments. They're developed by our teachers and our staff. So the goal is really to have a balanced assessment system. We have a lot of stakeholders. We have our students, our families, we have our community, we have state and federal policymakers that look at assessments, and they have different needs for knowledge. And it's a challenge. We have to balance these assessment needs. We need to think about accountability, requirements, federal requirements, but we also have to think about what teachers need in their classrooms so their needs to be balanced. Assessments also, in order to achieve educational equity, they have to be accessible to all students. We have to make sure that there are supports. We don't want to modify an assessment and make it easier, but we do want to make it accessible to students. For example, an MLL student, how do we know that they are good enough that they cannot read the problem being given to them? There's such a thing as a text reader, so they can hear the question. They have to do the analysis, and we get a true reading. The assessment gives a true reading of what they can do and what they need. So having a high quality data is important, but what you do with that data is really what matters. And the last bullet, I think the most important point, is assessment viewed in isolation will not improve achievement. It's what you do with that assessment data. Now, this is a graphic of a continuous process, an ongoing process of student improvement. So you see assessing skills, analyzing data, but then the real work starts. Teachers and school leaders must interpret results and make instructional decisions. Is the teaching and learning process functioning well for all students, or is there a need for adjustments? This process, so after you interpret results, you make adjustments to your practice, to your teaching if needed. You need to monitor those changes if they're making a difference. So it's a continuous cycle. But we have to realize for this cycle to be timely and effective, there's a need for increased accessibility to assessment results. The assessment results are just the trigger. They're just the beginning to the process. I want to say a word about assessment and accountability and the relationship. Sometimes they're used interchangeably, but they're not really the same, although they complement each other. So when we assess, we monitor the results of our actions. In accountability, others use initiatives that take action to really monitor the results of our actions. So accountability really is a major part of Connecticut's state plan. And this state plan is tied into federal regulation, Every Student Succeeds Act. And really they go hand in hand, so they really complement. Sometimes accountability has a negative connotation, but we are accountable to ourselves, to our students, and to our community. So even though we assess to determine, we have accountability for educating all of our students. And in the next few months, we will be receiving next generation accountability reports for the district and for schools. And these will focus on 12 indicators that are deemed very important for student success. Not just academic indicators. We'll be looking at chronic absenteeism. We'll be looking at factors like graduation rate, physical fitness, art access, and we'll be hearing more about these accountability reports. So unlike most presentations, I have no data to share, but just these broad concepts. Thank you for your time. Are there any questions?
So, Diane, so assessment basically is a way for the learning community, teachers and others to know where a child is at a particular time, so that you can hopefully catch him or her before it gets.
That's the goal. We want to track, we want to make sure every student is meeting their learning goals.
Right.
We can't do that at the end of the year. It's an ongoing process. Now here's Kristen Smith, our Director of School Improvement.
I think this part of the presentation will help answer sort of exactly where your question is going. So good evening, Dr. Estrella and members of the board. Just get this microphone at a good height. So I'm going to talk to you tonight about our data and evaluation department and the work that we have done so far. One of the key strategic priorities, specifically within the excellence priority, was the desire to build a research and evaluation department that would develop the organizational capacity to link, analyze, and report critical data on student plans, progress, and support across systems and through student transitions. And so the update today is about the work that we have in fact done to build that research and evaluation department and to develop our capacity. And while the work that we do is specifically named within the excellent strategic priority, it actually touches all of our strategic priorities. When we speak about continuous improvement and using data to drive improvement, that's actually how we move the work in all areas that Norwalk Public Schools is engaging in. So as we've worked to develop our organizational capacity around data, we've really followed a two-pronged approach to build capacity. So thinking about what are the data tools that we need. So how do we get the data into the hands of decision makers at the right time and in a format that is usable? And then on top of that, what is the process that we want our decision makers to use to engage with that data? Right? It's not just static numbers on a page, but really how do we make it come alive so that we can use it to make decisions? So the key questions we really want our decision makers to be asking as they engage with that data are kind of twofold, right? How do we know if students are learning? So our assessment data would speak to that, whether we're talking about the summative assessment data that Diane just spoke about, the more local assessment data, or the true formative assessment data that's coming from our classrooms. In addition to whether students are learning, we want to know whether students are on track, right? So on track meaning are we going to meet our goal of having all of our students future ready? So what does that look like, not just at grade 12 when they're graduating, but how can we back that up to be able to say, this is what on track means in grade 3, right? This is what on track means in grade 6, in grade 8, in grade 9, and so on. And then really important to that is not just if they are on track or not, or if they are learning, but if they're not, what are we going to do? We cannot ensure equitable outcomes unless we are asking that question and answering that question in all of our spaces, whether we're talking about from the district level, from the school leader level, teacher teams, teacher leaders, individual teachers. So these are really what we are focused on as we increase our capacity. All of this gets embedded within continuous improvement. So I know Diane Florgo just shared one graphic of continuous improvement. Here is another one that the district uses, and it is taken from the healthcare industry, actually. What I love about this graphic, the one that we just saw that Diane shared, had a number of different steps in it. This one really boils down to 4 steps, which are kind of easy to keep in mind. We plan, right? We have a change we want to make to reach a goal. So we develop a plan. We do whatever we've planned, and we test and collect data as we've done that. We then study that data to determine what our next action needs to be. So to make this really tangible, right, I mean, think about this in your own life. People often set goals around health or weight or fitness. That might be my goal, and then I'm going to identify a change I need to make to achieve that goal. I'm going to do what I said I was going to do. Maybe I changed the way I'm eating, monitoring perhaps my energy level, how I feel every day, what the scale says, right? So that ultimately I'm going to either continue what I'm doing, which would be adopting what I've just done. I might abandon what I have been testing out, right? Or I might adapt it. I might need a small change or a big change. When we talk about this at the classroom level, we're really talking about that in that plan, in that do, is about the assessment that Diane was just talking about. And then based on the assessment and the data that that assessment generates, we want to analyze the assessment, and then we want to act. That's an adjustment to instruction, right? I may find that I need to do a small group support of a group of students. I may find that my whole classroom needs to readdress this concept, perhaps through some sort of discourse, perhaps through modeling it a different way. I might need more targeted support of my individual students. So when we ask this question, how do we know if students are learning, as Diane Florgo mentioned, we have all of these different systems and they work in very siloed places. So as a teacher, or as a school leader, or even as a district person, if I want to know how students are learning, I have to go either to all of these different websites, right? I have to get into the NWEA site, I have to get into the state site, I have to access all of this data, and all of that exists separately from our local Norwalk assessments, right? And so, or I'm looking at spreadsheets and I'm sorting through them, and that is a very time-consuming way for us to analyze data. And so one thing that we have done this year is to launch a platform which is called Otis. And what that does is it houses all of these assessment data in one place, right? So students can take assessments in there. So for example, if they were taking a test in a math class, they can take the test in there. All of the data is saved, and then they can generate analytics on that. But a teacher can also look across all of these different types of assessments to really begin to see what the need is of individual students, for groups of students, always thinking about, are students learning? Who is not learning? What else is needed? That's the only way we can generate equitable outcomes. So these are just a few examples of what can be accessed within this system. I can look at the top graphic, which is an actual, if this assessment was given, I could take a look at the assessment and see overall, how did my class do? What were the breakdown of scores? I can also look at this data by standard to say, wow, we're doing a great job with this standard, but my class could really use some additional instruction of this standard. Or this group of students or individual students could use some additional work of this standard. And so within the system, at any point, anything that they click on, any part of the bar graph, it will pull up additional data so that teachers will know exactly what students we're talking about, right? Who needs more or different. Within the visualization, we also, again, in our support of equity and equitable outcomes, are able to look at this data by things like gender and race. Whether our students are, how our English language learners are doing compared to how our non-English language learners are doing, how our students with IEPs are doing. So all of this analysis where students, where we can really identify student need becomes a lot quicker, where teachers were having to spend time manually combing through data or entering data into a spreadsheet and then having to use some Excel skills to figure it out. Once this data is in here and students have taken it, they can really just kind of do a few clicks on these visualizations. So yeah, has the potential to really be a game changer for us. And then the other question we want to ask about is how students are on track. And so right now, through our partnership with the Connecticut RISE Network, we have access to some tools that help us to answer this question. So the RISE dashboard, this is something that houses data from K through 12. For elementary schools, it's really attendance and enrollment data. There is suspension data, but we don't really have suspensions at the entry level, so there's really not much data there. For our middle schools, we have suspension data, enrollment, and attendance. At the high school level, there's a lot more data available. Things like academic achievement, course performance are available at the high school level. And then RISE has also launched, which all of our high schools have access to and have received training on, something called the Data Hub. And this is a much more interactive website that they can use. They can download data, they can customize kind of what they're looking at, do some more drilling down. This is specifically for 9 through 12 at the moment, and we know that this is a gap. So this is something that we are looking at figuring out how we can build out our academic achievement data in the K through 8 space so that we can better answer the on-track question for our students and intervene far earlier than just waiting in high school to figure out if a student is or is not on track. That's the areas being developed for K through 8. So I know that that's kind of a lot of information. I'd love to answer any questions that you have.
This Otis program, it's for teachers and administrators to be looking at the results?
So yes, so the teacher teams can use the data to collaboratively look at the results and to design instructional adaptations that will allow them to better meet the needs of their students.
Is Otis at all connected to students' Power School profile in middle and high school?
So, so it is connected from Power School to Otis. So Otis pulls data from Power School. So that's where they get like class lists from, demographic data. All of that comes from Power School. There is no communication from Otis back to Power School.
Is part of the plan to have Otis kind of from some of the cumulative profile of students starting pretty much those who are using elementary school going forward?
It absolutely can be. So one of the things that we can do in Otis is we can actually create a portfolio of student work within there. So while currently it will house, I can pull up an individual student and take a look at historically how they've done on something like the NWEA map or historically how their attendance has been. But as we use this system more often, and then there actually becomes assessments from within our own curriculum, and that will be available for teachers to take a look at, so they'll have a better understanding of the trajectory or the path that a student has walked so far.
Awesome.
Has Otis been introduced just this year? Is this?
Correct, yes. So we have started over the summer with implementation. We're currently training, different schools are in different places in terms of adoption. So some schools have started right away in the system. We're training kind of school by school to meet individual need, so that it's not a one-size-fits-all approach to using the system, but really taking into account what the needs are of individual schools and individual teachers and students, so that we're using this platform as well as we possibly can.
So I look at this and I say, this is all really fabulous, comprehensive data, tools that you're able to use to educate our students so that they can read and do math and all of that. At the same time, you'll have those who'll say, oh, but children are having trouble reading or writing or doing math. How would you answer that question with all of this information that you present to us?
Sure, so I can look at within here, this is exactly what we want to be able to look at, right? Which children are struggling learning math or with reading, and where specifically are they struggling, so that we can better adapt our instruction. But what it also will allow us to do from a district perspective is take a look at where needs are greatest, so that we can be strategic about the way that we do it. Thank you.
To Sherry's point, I think it'd be great to kind of highlight how much women and man hours it's cut piecemeal the information needed to be able to target who it is that we're emphasizing. Have you guys just at all been able to compare, how much hours it's cut in half? I think it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, we don't have an actual metric yet to compare that. I mean, we have sort of more anecdotal, there's a lot in the Otis system that can also auto score. So teachers are also cutting down on grading time, where they only have to really grade the more open-ended responses, and they don't have to grade your multiple choice or fill in the blank questions. So we've heard anecdotally that it's a time saver, but we haven't been able to quantify how much it is.
On the time-saving issue, how are we allowing time for the teachers to do the planning in teams or alone during the school day? I mean, it seems like a lot to pull into.
Yeah, and I know that teachers have time to plan collaboratively. They have teachers time, right? And they also have it. Perhaps I would defer to exact amount of times to those who are.
So it depends on the grade level, but they have built-in time, teacher team time, and their planning time. We are in conversation, particularly for the elementary and middle schools, to really think about how, for the upcoming school year, we provide additional time for programming. But when we think about additional time, that means additional FTEs to cover those periods where teachers are utilizing for planning time. So it's something that if we have more resources, we would want to give more. We have within the current budgetary restraints that we have provided planning time. Our goal is to provide additional planning time so that teachers have more substantive time to plan collectively, in addition to the time they already have during the preps to use the data to plan for their day-to-day lessons.
Sounds very powerful.
All right, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. McBride.
And I think what Kristen fails to communicate is that she's leading a lot of professional learning around this work. Her and Alden have been meeting with our data point people in school and supporting them with their onboarding of Otis. She's also working with individual ILT teams to support them with their VDI process. So she's leading a lot of that work, which we are excited about. And I just mentioned Mr. Olive Burnham. So one of the things that I think Diane talked about in her presentation is the idea of silo. As you can see, there are a variety of data sets. You have a variety of different assessments happening. We're taking surveys. And so when I came in, I was on my philosophy was, why can't we have almost a Walmart philosophy, like a one-stop shop? Why can't we have it all in one place? Why do I have to go over here, then go over here? What can we do to make it more easier and more accessible for people, whether it be teachers, the district office, and even parents and students to be able to access information and be able to do the work that they need to do around that. And so I had a conversation with Mr. Ralph Balazizi, and along with Kristen, and so he communicated that RISE, as you can see, RISE was working specifically with our high schools, but they were unable to do the work with our K-8. And so thankfully, through our conversation with Emily from RISE, she informed us of a program as I was looking for a data analyst to create this vision that I had in my head of this dashboard, to partner with Harvard's Center for Research, Center for Education Policy Research, to this project called Harvard Strategic Data Project. And so what that is, that as a school community, we identify a problem of practice that we want to solve. And we partnered with Harvard, who identify individuals who have specific skill sets to address that particular problem of practice. So our initial problem of practice was just to identify or create this dashboard, because we had it for 9 to 12, but we had nothing for K-8. And so as a part of being a part of this project, myself and our fellow, who is Olive Burnham, who will come in a second, have to go to Harvard to, number one, acclimate ourselves to the actual expectations of the program, but then also think through what is the real root cause, or what is the real question we're trying to answer. And so he and myself went about a week ago, and it changed our problem of practice to really identify the work that he's going to be concentrating on that will still yield us the ability to have this dashboard, but the purpose of it will be significantly impactful to the district and specific targeted students.
And the one thing that I just want to emphasize that all of this work and this team has been developed through philanthropic dollars, which we're really appreciative of our philanthropic partners, because we will not be able to create what I call the nucleus of the organization without their support. Our organization couldn't continue to exist without the data analytical systems to really inform our practice the way it was in the past. And because of the support, now we are able to build a nucleus that will continuously help inform the work that we do on a yearly and day-to-day basis.
So now I'd like to turn it over to our Strategic Data Project fellow, Mr. Olive Burnham.
Thank you to Dr. Estrella and the school board. I'm really excited to be here to talk about some of the work that Dr. McBride just introduced. As previously alluded to, I'm a Strategic Data Project Fellow, which means I'm here to help transform the use of data in the district, and in collaboration with all these other like-minded folks over here. We're starting to make some progress on that. And so I'd like to share a few of the things that we've been working on and some of the ways that we've identified as areas to expand our strategic data use. One of the things that we did while we were at the orientation for the Strategic Data Fellowship is we used this rubric to analyze where we were as a district. It's helpful to know where you're starting from in order to know where you're going to go. And we, in doing this, identified the status of the analytic capacity of Norwalk Public Schools. And as multiple people have alluded to so far, we noted that data is our silo rather than centralized, right? And so this first problem that is really important when you're thinking about how to monitor programs, how to establish where you want to go, how to measure things effectively, bringing data under one umbrella, or as Dr. Estrella said, into a nucleus is very, very important. And that's why, as of right now, we're just kind of emerging in our use of data as a district. And that's fine that we've identified that. What I'm here to do is help push us in a direction where we can say that we're monitoring progress and measuring things and understanding exactly where students are at so that we can help push them in the right direction as warm demanders. And so we're just emerging now, but that's fine because the important thing to note is that we're going to move in a direction through these creation of a central data warehouse, and then also through the creation of dashboards so that we can help educators use data more effectively. So this is our little image of the silos that we have data in right now. As I said, we're trying to centralize these things, create a data nucleus. It's not just the assessment data that are siloed. It's the fact that we have our student information system. We now have Otis, which is another silo in its own way. We have Google spreadsheets that some schools and some people are using to keep track of things. And we're trying to bring all these things together so that we can, as a district, monitor things more effectively. And the goal of that is really to create a dashboard. So as I was driving here, my gas light went off. I realized that I was low on gas. This is the kind of thing that I wouldn't have noticed if that gas light wasn't there. The goal of these data dashboards is that we can create that exact system for monitoring student progress. A little light goes off if a student's not meeting a certain standard in their reading by the time they're in grade 3, and that allows that teacher to design an effective intervention to get that student where they need to be. So that's the real power of what we're trying to do. And this here is an image of the RISE dashboards that already exist for high schoolers. And we're expanding the use of this. Kristen's been doing some wonderful work with establishing communities of practice and helping to expand the use of these dashboards for high schools. But what we don't have right now are dashboards for kindergarten through 8th grade. We don't have middle school or elementary school dashboards, and our data collection is somewhat limited in our analytic capacity. And so part of what I'm doing as well is not just centralizing data, but also figuring out the optimal way to measure things. And that's a direction that I ultimately want to go. Kristen alluded to the fact that we are measuring suspensions in high school, and we've got some wonderful conclusions we've drawn about equity from that suspension data. We don't have that data for elementary and middle school, right? So we're thinking of more creative ways that we can measure behavior and social emotional learning so that we can identify gaps in equity. And while we were thinking through all of this, right, the district has already identified this as a goal of using data more strategically to identify these gaps. While Dr. McBride and I were at Harvard last week, we realized that the problem is not actually so much in centralizing the data. That's an important project, don't get me wrong, but the problem is that there are equity gaps that we are noticing. So for example, when you think about our ultimate goal as a district is to help every student succeed and be future ready when they graduate high school, we've already identified as a district that there are certain groups of students that are not reaching that goal at the same rate as others. There is a discernible equity gap in the number of multilingual learners and students with disabilities that are graduating high school. There's a gap in how often they're graduating. Right? That is a problem. And that's a problem that we're hoping to use data to address in a strategic way. So once we've framed that problem and we've identified that we need to close those gaps to achieve our mission, then we can think about how we can use those dashboards and create those dashboards with the end user in mind to really address that problem. And so in thinking that way, we're kind of backwards designing here, as educators say, right? We're working with the end in mind. So we want students to graduate and be future ready when they get to the 12th grade, but what does that look like in the 9th grade, right? It means that they're taking enough credits to be able to graduate and they're passing enough classes to be able to graduate. What does it look like in the 6th grade? Well, it means that they're passing their smarter balanced assessments, which indicates that they're on track to be able to achieve middle school classes, which is an important transition for kids, right? What does it look like even in 3rd grade? We know from data that 3rd grade reading level is very important when you're understanding the transition from learning to read to reading to learn, right? That's an important transition that allows kids to move forward academically. So apologies for another driving analogy, but along this track, we're trying to intervene to close those gaps and intervene early, which is the key part of using data strategically. And the last thing I want to share is an example of recent work. So Dr. McBride already alluded to the fact that Kristen's been leading these instructional teams in using data strategically. And I just wanted to share this because I think it's a really concrete example of what we envision for using data as a district. So to give you some context, a lot of our research that we're doing with RISE is based around chronic absenteeism. We know that if students miss even 2 days of school a month, that impacts their ability to achieve those milestones that I just mentioned. Even 2 days a month can put a kid off track to graduate high school. This is a powerful conclusion. And so we know that certain populations of students are not are more likely to miss 2 days of school a month, particularly in Norwalk, in Connecticut, and even across the country. So we were looking at data with these instructional leads in a classroom last week, and one of our instructional leads noticed that in her district, the trend was flipped. Multilingual learners were actually attending school more often than their peers. This is a striking conclusion. Like I said, in the rest of the country, that's not the case. And this sparked an interesting discussion among the people in the room where there was sharing of practices that school, that lead was doing to result in that conclusion, right? That there were actually better attendance for multilingual learners in that school. And so sharing those practices about like when does a family get called, when is knowledge shared with families about attendance data, those kinds of sharing of practices based in the data can be really powerful ways to intervene early and get kids on track to meet our district goals of having kids be future ready when they graduate. So yeah, that's kind of the work that we've been working on. Any questions that I can answer about that?
I don't know if you're the person, this might be interesting. Is differentiated learning strategy, is that still a thing? Is that still something that?
Absolutely.
Okay, because I'm just wondering, that must impact, right? I mean, you could have, I don't know, 6 or 7 or more learning styles in a classroom, right? So how does that impact the children who may be on track for learning, as opposed to some who may be having struggles, and just talk about the strategies that instructors have to use to be able to, because that speaks to the equity too.
So one of the key components of being able to have data systems is being able to utilize these tools to inform instructional practices. Mm-hmm. There are multi-tiers in which you utilize it. One would be day-to-day lesson planning, looking at where your students are. A lot of people have the misconception that the only way you collect data is through an actual test. But in reality, tasks, work sample, exit slips, there's an array of different ways that we're constantly collecting student information of where they are, what they need, and what they need to improve upon. So within the scope of the curriculum, one of the things that we're constantly engaging our pedagogues on is really looking at who the students in the room are, how to group them based on the data, and in turn differentiate for their learning. You might have students that might be at the bottom third of the class. They might require certain strategies and techniques that are different than the kids that are performing in the upper third. And making sure that not only you're providing the tools that students need that might be needing that additional push, but also allowing students that are able to move ahead or expand their knowledge in a deeper way within that standard, the opportunity to have access to do that. And that has been one of our big pushes or areas that we're pushing around curricular development. And daily lesson planning is making sure that teachers are being intentional about the modifications they're making around student learning, particularly looking at who the students are in front of them and what are the shifts they need to make as a result of it. Also with the teacher teams and their time spent in looking at student data, how are they utilizing what they learn from those conversations to one, make modifications or make day-to-day lesson plan modifications based on what students are able or not able to do in the moment that they need to support them.
It's challenging for teachers out of that. That's a challenging thing to do.
It's challenging, but it's the core of the work, because in any classroom, you're gonna have a diverse learning styles and diverse learners, and we have to make sure that we make informed decisions by utilizing different data points to effectively support them. Because even in the continuum of kids that might be struggling in a particular area, they might master another, and they might shift tiers depending on the standard of focus. So we have to be very strategic in how we're utilizing the data points and informing what we're doing day to day in the classroom. And it's not easy, but it's essential if we're going to make sure that every child strives.
I'm going to hand it over to Heidi to talk about school quality review. Thank you.
I want to check on Sherelle and Erica. I can't see them. Any questions, ladies?
I'm good. Thank you, Diane. Diana.
I'm good as well, thank you.
Little adjustment here. Big difference in height. So my name's Heidi Kurovich. Thank you for having us here today. I'm going to discuss with you school quality reviews. So the school quality review is completely aligned to the strategic priorities, and I'll call those out throughout my presentation. One of my favorite quotes by Isaac Asimov is, "I believe in evidence. I believe in observation, measurement, and reasoning confirmed by independent observers. I'll believe anything, no matter how wild and ridiculous, if there is evidence for it." So when I go to a school as the reviewer, I'm looking for that evidence. And the school is providing the evidence. I need to make sure that it is what we call triangulated, that I get it from multiple sources, at least 3, so that I can hear that it's consistent throughout the school, and this is the way they do things. So, what is this? A little background on school quality review. Last year, 10 schools received a school quality review, and this year, 10 will receive the school quality review. These are the baseline data. The school leaders and 4 of their team members came to a training, an all-day training where I taught them the ins and outs of the school quality review. They also had multiple opportunities to plan for bringing this back to their school site so that they can turnkey it to their staff members, so everyone at the school site, community members, and parents and guardians would understand the whole process. Then they embark on it until I come to their school. The foundation of the school quality review is the school quality review rubric. And there are 4 domains. Number 1 is clear focus and priorities. Number 2 is the instructional core. Number 3 are systems and structures. And number 4 is supportive school environment and culture. Here you'll see the school quality review graphic. And on the outer rim of the school quality review graphic, you'll see 4 key points that are embedded throughout the rubric. We have leadership, family partnerships, trust, and equity. There are, for each of those 4 domains, there are indicators underneath each one of them, as you see in the graphic. And at the center are students. The goal is to increase student achievement. And for each of the 4 domains, for example, you'll see under clear focus and priorities, 1.1 have the vision, mission, goals, and theory of action. And then 1.2 is continuous improvement, school improvement cycle and growth plan. So the data-driven and continuous school improvement cycle that my colleagues have been talking about runs across all 10 of these indicators. And let's take a look at what the rubric looks like. So here is 1.1, vision, mission, goals, and theory of action. Every one of the 10 indicators looks just like this. It's the same format. Over here, on the left-hand side, you'll see this is the definition of the indicator. Then next to it are the big ideas for each of the 3 sub-indicators, A, B, and C. Then you'll notice across the top that there are 4 levels, from exemplary, proficient, developing, to underdeveloped. Ralph, they can't see what I'm about to show them. Thank you. So the first part of the, within each sub-indicator are the practices, the things that staff members do on a daily basis. And then in italics is the impact of those practices. And the key is that to receive a rating, they have to have both the practices and the impact at that level. If they have the practices, but the impact is not yet there, then it goes down a level in rating. To receive a rating of the whole indicator, 2 of the 3 sub-indicators must be rated the same. For example, if A and B are proficient and C is developing, then the school would receive a rating of proficient for 1.1. So here's the differences between practices and impact. Practice are those actions that school staff do on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, and these are informed by their expectations, beliefs, and/or goals. The impact is the result of those practices on student work, products, and cognitive engagement, academic and personal behaviors, as well as the teachers' instructional and leadership capacity. So I'm looking for both of these under each sub-indicator. Let me give you an example of what it looks like between ratings. So this is proficient, the difference between proficient and exemplary for 2.1B, which is 2.1 is curriculum. Bear with me while I read this aloud. There are color-coded differences that are underlined as well here. Standards aligned, higher order, and rigorous thinking skills are strategically emphasized in curriculum maps, lessons, and tasks, and are embedded in a logical and purposeful progression across grades and subjects, so that all learners, including MLLs and students with disabilities across the school, demonstrate their thinking verbally, in written form, and through explicit metrics. That's exemplary. Proficient, standards aligned, higher order, and rigorous thinking skills are consistently emphasized in curricula, including maps, lessons, and tasks, demonstrating a progression across grades and subjects, so that most learners, including MLLs and students with disabilities across the school, demonstrate their thinking verbally, in written form, and through other explicit metrics. So there are some differences, strategically emphasized versus consistently emphasized. What's the difference? If a school determines that they have certain standards and skills that students have not achieved at a high level as yet, they may select that as the one that will spiral upwards across grades and subjects. That is strategically emphasized instead of consistently, which although it's done, it may not have that strategy behind it in the use of data to determine this. Embedded in a logical and purposeful progression versus demonstrating a progression, there is a difference between able to demonstrate that there's some thought behind the progression versus it is deeply rooted within their curricula and tasks and lessons to ensure that this is a logical and purposeful, it's intentional decision making. All learners versus most learners. This is not every single learner, this is all groups of learners. So, versus most learners. School quality review is and is not. It is definitely a positive opportunity for schools to focus on continual improvement. It is a reflection on the implementation of the school's improvement plan, a progress check on this, on their vision, mission, goals, and areas of action. It provides a chance to strengthen, support, and invest stakeholders more deeply in these items. It is collaboration of stakeholders and a cycle of inquiry and self-review, and a benchmark check is against the school quality review rubric. It is not a gotcha. I am not coming to a school to look under the rug for some secret, no. It is not a gotcha, it is not an accreditation, it is not a new set of goals and strategies, and it is not an evaluation of the principal. It is, however, a school quality review report will be created from this. There will be an area for celebration and an area for improvement. That area for improvement will generate a visit from the school improvement team, and they will come within a week of me leaving the school to support the school and co-create cycles of support to help them improve that area. Let's talk about the process itself. There are several events that occur across the visit. It is usually a 2-day visit unless it is a comprehensive high school. They get 3 days or 2.5. There are multiple meetings throughout the visit across both days, or where I meet with the principal and select school leaders. There are 9 classroom visits for most schools and 15 for comprehensive high schools. There's a teacher meeting regarding academics. There's a teacher and counselor meeting regarding school culture. There is also a teacher team meeting that I observe. There are 2 student meetings, one focused on academics and one focused on school culture. There's a parent guardian meeting, a school governance council family meeting, those family members who are part of this SGC, and the school's choice. Here the school gets to show off something that makes their school special, whether it's their theme or their pathway. It could be special classes they can show. It can even be a non-SQR event like advisory. There are 5 phases to the school quality review. The first is pre-work. That's when I delve deeply into the school's data and their school improvement plan to understand about the school's goals and vision, mission, and so on, so that I can understand where they are and where they're going. Then the school sends me multiple documents, and the most important document besides the master schedule and the draft schedule for our visit is their pre-review school reflection, where they've had all the stakeholders come together to answer several questions regarding the different indicators across the rubric. They provide this to me as a sampling of the school so that I have an idea of how to tailor my questions to them based on this reflection. Then comes the site visit, where I talk to you about all those different events that occur. At the end of the site visit, I provide the school with the ratings for the 10 indicators and verbal feedback regarding these preliminary ratings. And then a week after I leave, within a week after I leave, comes phase 3, and that's when the school improvement team comes in to support the school and co-create the cycles of support. Then, and the improvement action plan. Phase 4 is when I write my report, and it goes through a quality assurance process whereby my reader then provides me with feedback and to ensure clarity of voice and deeply rooted in the rubric to make sure it's exacting. The phase 5 is when the school receives the report and they verify that all the facts are true. And if there's an error, I correct it immediately, and then they can share it with their school community. If a school prefers, they can also complete the appeal process and submit it to Dr. Estrella. Like my colleague said earlier, we've got the continual improvement cycles and the DDI cycle, or data-driven instruction cycle. And this occurs across the rubric from 1.1 all the way down to 4.2. So throughout the rubric, I'm looking at how the stakeholders are using data to make decisions. Any questions? I know it was an awful lot. Thank you. Okay, I'd like to introduce Carol Wilshire-Top.
Heidi. Good evening, Dr. Estrella, Board of Education members, our scholars and families that are at home joining us this evening. My name is Carol Wilshire-Toth, and I am the Workforce Development Manager for Norwalk Public Schools. A lot of people will ask me, what is workforce development and what exactly does that mean? Well, there's been a lot of talk at the state level, and the talk at the state level is about helping adults get skilled, who may be underskilled, who may be unemployed, credentials, licensing, and certifications. Well, I have the opportunity, and I'm very excited to bring this to Norwalk Public Schools because joining the team in April as a workforce development manager, I've been able to bring that also to K-12. So that's really my charge, is to work with workforce development, purposeful programming for K-12, and also for our students and families 18 and older. So the MPS Workforce Development mission and vision is to provide access and opportunity for all scholars in grades K-12, including their family members, 18 plus, as I just spoke of, through purposeful district-wide programming. The workforce development work is in alignment with our national and Connecticut career clusters, which we'll talk about in a few minutes, our K-12 Connecticut Comprehensive School Counseling Framework, which I will also mention, and also our strategic plan priorities for future readiness. So when you think about this position, you think about creating and building a structure that really needs to support our students K-12 and our adults 18 plus and their families. So if you take a look, we start with early childhood and we move through the continuum all the way to lifelong learners, and we visit in between K-8, high school, post-secondary planning, and of course, career development. So looking at the structure that's been built for Norwalk Public Schools, I'm looking at building K-1 and 2, building skills amongst all of our scholars in those grade levels, skills that will serve them no matter what they choose to do. In grades 3 to 5 for our scholars, career exploration and enrichment, and grades 6 to 12 are career pathways with exposure and internships as well. For our 18 plus scholars, we have family opportunities for them as well, working with families and scholars at the same time. And we're going to get into a little bit about this in a few minutes as well, and I will expand upon that. So I wanted to start and share with you a highlight of something that has been implemented starting in September. I was able to convene under workforce development a committee of our school counselors who came together wanting to write developmental guidance and lesson plans for our scholars. So the Connecticut Counseling Framework is simply that. It is a document that is our guide for grades K to 12 that will tell us what students should know in certain grade levels depending upon which category. So the categories in this particular guide are social emotional, academic, and career. So the committee that was convened, we focused upon the career aspect under workforce development. And so if you take a look, here, you will see that as an example, when we look at the framework of under which we worked to identify likes and dislikes, hobbies and leisure activities that kindergarten students, our scholars, could name. We also looked at 3 reasons why someone chooses a particular job. Those are just an example of what the actual standard looks like that our kindergarten students should know. So based on that committee, the school counselors created 18 kindergarten lessons that have been implemented in September that are going out to all of our kindergarten students, delivered through a push-in model in their classrooms, and that will continue from September to June. And it's now memorialized in that this will take place every year for our kindergarten students. So that's something that we've already gone ahead and implemented. The next highlight I wanted to share with you is my workforce development enrichment series. How to capture everyone from kindergarten to 12th grade, 18 plus, our scholars and our families in one place. How to have a one-stop shop where they could go to fulfill many of their needs. So what I developed was a series, which is a series of opportunities in a few different areas. So think about a one-stop shop in this particular series and having some different categories to it. Year-round, volunteer, internship, apprenticeship and training, and summer. These are all opportunity categories. So I invite everyone who's home now on their cell phone or computer, or anyone taking a look at it later, to visit our website, to go to norwalkps.org, to go over schools, and then go to career and training opportunities. It is there that in all of these categories, our scholars and families will see all the opportunities before them in these specific categories. So for example, in the year-round enrichment category, I partnered with an organization who will offer scholars 16 and older who want to learn Spanish, including their families, can do so virtually for free. That is something that is in the year-round opportunity. Apprenticeship and training, I wanted to highlight for you, really categorizes all of the trades and different trades within, I should say different trades that are there. So students can look at plumbing, they can look at pouring foundation, any trade possible. And it's important that I mention that in the apprenticeship and training category, that these opportunities are low cost or no cost. And I think that's very important for everyone to see that there are opportunities out there that speak to people's passions and interests. So not only does it serve K-12, 18 plus, it also is a tool for staff. I've done a lot of staff training where I've had the opportunity to meet with them and to train them on this particular tool to be able to use with their scholars and families as well. So I wanted to talk about the 16 national career clusters. So we have these career clusters, and I want you to think of them like umbrellas, like the big title, okay? The state of Connecticut and the nation has said, if we organize our classes in accordance with these career clusters, then we have a direction in which to go. So these are just the headings. And what I've done is I've worked very closely, beginning in April, with Building Leadership to name the career clusters that we currently have in our schools, grades 6 to 12. So when you look at this graphic, all of the clusters are represented, and the ones that are indicated are the ones we currently have in our schools, which is very exciting in grades 6 to 12. So within the career cluster, there are dedicated pathways, and these pathways are set from a national level, from a state level, in terms of the names of the pathways and what they are. So you have a cluster like human services, and then within that you would have a wellness pathway. And then within the wellness pathway, you would have physical education and health, and that's just one example. So the work I've done with Building Leadership has allowed me to formalize the pathways that we currently offer in grades 6 to 12. Our pathways have now been formalized at all of our schools, and we have 40 pathways to offer all of our students between 6 and 12, which is really, really exciting. Now, how does that relate to our scholars? Pathways give our scholars an opportunity to use voice and choice when it comes to their classes. It gives them an opportunity to name what they want to study, what they want to take, and where they want to go. Pathways are really a means of exposure. So a pathway doesn't lock in a student. We're not asking them to pick a pathway in 6th grade and then have that in 12th grade. It's about exposure. So it's just naming what they'd like to study. So that work has been done with Building Leadership in grades 6 to 12, and that's been very exciting work to see all the good work that's already been done and how it's come together and how we've been able to name them. So I wanted to also introduce to you another highlight. One of the priorities was that we have students that are interested in early childhood education and also in becoming teachers. We wanted to create an opportunity for them to come together and put that to practice. So in doing so, creating the education internship, which places students in pre-K classrooms for internship experience and also K-5 after school as well. And that's been a really exciting opportunity. Not only are students getting to have choice in what they do with their time and selecting to apply for this internship, which has been offered to our high schools and our scholars, but also them having the exposure and falling in love with a particular experience and having that opportunity. Of course, also we know that early childhood education and teachers are a critical piece for us at Norwalk Public Schools and across the nation. And so in the hopes that our students will certainly love this experience and maybe decide to join us one day as well. Does anyone have any questions at all?
Where is do we still have the school to career program over at Bryan Lincoln? I was gonna ask, where does that fit in? I guess it would be in the high school piece, but it was in the guidance department, it was a school to career program. Do we still have that? I don't know. So with that, I'm assuming that it would probably be in the high school aspect of your presentation, but maybe we don't have it. It was in the guidance department at one time with the school to career program.
So we have elements of that work. We might not be calling it school to career. We're looking at different pathways that yield certification. We're in the process of working with NCC and finalizing two different paths to certification, particularly for our students that might be at risk. And we want to make sure that they graduate, but also have the opportunity to have work placement right after graduation if they so choose to. And we have a number of different pathways that line up when we can look at PTAD and what they have to offer, like health careers are also another avenue by which students can get work opportunities right after graduation. For those students that are not seeking college as their path forward from beyond their high school graduation. So we have a number of different trajectories that have been developed and are afforded to our scholars across the district.
How do our scholars find out about this? Is it in an after-school activity? Is it during class?
Well, it depends on the initiative that we're talking about. So I work very closely with the school teams to advertise and promote, and also with my team members in communications as well, from the parent perspective, so that there is an awareness of all of the work that is ongoing. So it really depends on grade level, what the initiative is, but working with teams, working with parents.
Do you work with Carver also?
You know, Carver is also one of our partners, and I will often engage with them in different aspects, yes.
I say that because I ran into a high school girl last week in my neighborhood. I lived there, Bryan McMahon, and she told me that she was going to be working in kindergarten. She was 14 or 15, and I thought she said it was through the Carver, but maybe through you. I'm not sure, but I thought it was wonderful. She said, "I think I want to be a teacher. I'm going to be able to do
That's
this
wonderful.
with kindergarten kids."
That's terrific. That is great. Yeah, so there are many partners throughout the work that I'm doing, depending on the actual work. And so without those partnerships, the work would be siloed, and it's very much a team effort in all respects to bring different opportunities to our scholars and bring in the right people to be on the team so that our scholars can be most successful.
About how many of our students do you impact? So
Well, and we offer it to all of our students, and they of course have to meet certain criteria to be in the internship. We want to ensure that they have a certain grade level so that their focus doesn't have to be on their own studies, and we're not taking them to that. So it's been offered to the high schools, and we've been placing students since September So it's going very well. We're placing them on a rolling basis until June.
So tens of?
I would say about, right now, probably about 18 and ongoing, and 18 and still being placed. Because this is a first come, first served basis, and of course, reviewing their application, but it has to be their student interest and scholar interest in them wanting to participate in it.
And this is just one program of the many programs that Carol has been working on, particularly in bridging pathway opportunities to workforce experiences.
And so part of my vision too is that as we move down the road is to have internships in all different areas so that our students can follow, most importantly, their passions and interests, and what they're most interested in pursuing.
And also, Carol has forwarded information to me, so because I'm on different boards here in NOAA, I get to be able to help spread the word. So if you'd like to be a part of that, just let her know and she can send you the flyers. And then you can help, posting on your page, on your Board of Education page, to be able to get the families to hear it. Because sometimes, the child may be afraid or don't know what to ask, and then if they go home and the parent says something to them, then that helps them, move forward with that conversation and get more information.
One of the things that's really important to me in my work is always parents as partners. And it's really important and it matters. And so I'm working on that through all of the communication efforts. It's always at the forefront of my work. Thank you so much. I'd like to introduce our Director of Communications, Nick Dua.
Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Nick Dua. I'm the Director of Communications and Marketing. On behalf of my teammates, Emily Morgan and Rafael Samaniego, we are thrilled to present a glimpse of what we do. So we are a new group, as mentioned before. We are barely 90 days old, but through the guidance of Dr. Estrella and Dr. McBride, we've hit the ground running in telling the story of our community. For tonight, we want to provide an overview of our work through the lens of equity and within the strategic priorities presented prior. So, within the action item of improving communication with families, we've increased the use of dynamic video content to enhance and supplement our storytelling and communication initiatives. Video, we believe, humanizes the content and the story that we tell, as well as makes it more shareable within this social media environment that we find ourselves in. We've also paid close attention to our process of generating content, from the frequency, the quality, the accessibility. We want to reflect the people, culture, and compelling stories of our community. As a result, our Facebook posts have increased twofold as compared to the same time last year. So we really are trying to really push the envelope, but really also be mindful of how it relates to the goals that we want to follow at that point. So similarly, within the action item of enhanced communication under the engagement priority, we've been conscious of enhancing quality, creativity, accessibility, and community engagement with our print, social, and video. English, Spanish, and Haitian Creole versions are produced for district-wide publication. As an example of this is the recent State of the School magazine that hopefully that you've seen. Email, social posts, and news articles are translated in English and Spanish. All this boils down to engaging and representing the different voices of our community through all the mediums available to us. So I want to really I want to make sure that the voices within our team is represented here. So I'd like to invite Emily to continue our presentation.
I'm a little bit taller, so I'm going to bring this up.
Differentiated.
Yes, we're all different shapes and sizes here. So. All right, so also under priority 4 of engagement, we have innovate and refine our family engagement. So one way you've probably seen that is through our video that Nick and I and and Raphael recently, if you saw our amazing Hispanic Heritage Night 1 video the other day, that was Raphael's first, and it was amazing. But just to enhance and the look and quality of what we're producing for our families to see, and hopefully when they see that, that's bringing them back, and they're saying to their friends, oh, you gotta see this video, you gotta see the story that we produce that's about our kids, our teachers, the people that our kids see every day. And then another part of that is we're working closely with the Family Center to make sure that they have all the help that they need to engage our families. So while they're putting on the workshops, it's really our responsibility to make sure that those workshops and their activities are communicated. So like this week, we saw a lot of engagement with their trick-or-treating on Monday. And another recent example was they had a financial literacy workshop. And someone from the Family Center called me and said, hey, we're not really seeing a lot of engagement. Can you send it an email? And we did that, and then they had like 20 people call them the next day, sign up for a workshop. So it's just little things like that that hopefully, we can expand on it and make sure that we get that word out on everything that they do. Another big part of this is our partners with our philanthropic and our community organizations. Ways we've already seen that this year is working with the Norwalk Education Foundation. They helped us, we helped them put together a panel after their screening of screenagers. We worked with Food Corps and Norwalk Grows and our food service provider Chartwells recently at Fox Run to do CT, sorry, oh my gosh, I'm making it.
Healthy Kids.
Yes, Healthy Kids, but it was our CT Growth Week. And just how they're all working together to make sure to learn how fresh foods benefit our kids. And then I'm doing a story on that as well. Just partnering with them to make sure that their stories are being told just as much as our students' stories are being told, our teachers' stories, and our school stories as well. Not only are we partnering with our community organizations, but we're also partnering with our internal departments, which we saw with Carol and I. We've been working really closely to get the word out on the education internship and all of the other things that are part of her Richmond series. So that's been a really fun partnership so far. And lastly, also part of priority for engagement, leveraging our student voices. And this is something that I'm really excited to be a part of, because our kids have the just greatest stories, and they all have a story to tell, and I can't wait to tell them all. You already met Maria Cecilia Rivera, I think at your last meeting, who went to Space Camp, and it was just really cool to talk to her and then tell her story, not only for you guys to read, but on the website, and then we share that on social as well. Another collaboration that we have coming up with Carol is another internship opportunity that's going to be available for our high school students, and that is going to be an internship in our communications department. So they will get to work with us, and they're kind of going to be our embedded reporters in the high schools, and that's really going to help Nick and I, who are obviously new to the district. Like, they know their school, they know their friends' stories, and they're going to get to help us tell those stories, plus obviously get that communications experience that they'll be able to take on with them after high school. In closing, really, we're just really excited to tell the stories of everyone in this district and do it in every single way that we have possible. Obviously, we're on social media, we're on websites, we're on, we've got emails out, we're in print publications. Any kind of way that we can communicate with our families, we're going to do that. So, anybody have questions?
Thank you for your enthusiasm.
Thank you.
So when
Awesome.
it comes to the social media, I know if it's initiative going on in central office, you guys would probably do that, right? But if it's building level, is it still going to be coming from the building? So will the principal or some other
Right, so
person be responsible for that?
every school has a webmaster, and their webmaster also is in charge of their social media. So one way that we're trying to help them is either they'll send us stuff directly, or we're always monitoring all of the social media that's out there, and then trying to either reshare it or just give them tips in the future of like, hey, this is a better way to emphasize the project that you put on.
So they'll adhere to the 2 times, and I know you had something where you wanted them to do like 2 times a week, right, content? Is that what that was? So the buildings know to do that as well?
There may have, we have not set standards on that yet.
Okay.
But I think it really is it's a point of sort of amplification for both ends too. So amplifying their stories through us, but also our announcements centrally to each and every one of the buildings affected at that point too.
Are you guys gonna still do a newsletter? Are you gonna change that, or?
Well, I think we're definitely looking into, what I think, what's great thing about Dr. Estrella and Dr. McBride is they gave us the goal, but how to get there is, I think they left it us on how to interpret that.
So you're still formulating.
But yeah, but I think the information exchange, I think, is what we're trying to do as well, but yeah. But we're having
One of the
fun
things we want to
creating.
make sure is to align the work to how people communicate in the present. I don't know if newsletters are the best ways in which people receive and take in information. So we've been talking about not only using like videos, but like quick snippets of different forms of information series to provide information to the community. Because one, the previous newsletter was hard to navigate. People couldn't search back to find information. It was very long. And when we looked at how the frequency of people really diving into the tool, we couldn't really measure that, or we didn't really, things that were in the newsletter people were still asking about, which gave us information that people were not effectively utilizing.
And we're really aligning, a lot of our practice into sort of modern ways of communicating and how we consume content now. That is not necessarily just isolated within the district, but how, our kids and our learners and our parents are consuming content outside of sort of the bubble of the district itself. So we want to align that as much as possible. Thank you so much.
So one of the pieces that we were going to dive into today that we're going to, if the board is okay, we're going to transition into the business meeting. It's a piece around special education and the future of special education services. I would like to table that for today if the board agrees, and include that as part of my business, the business meeting superintendent report.
Right, so all in favor of tabling the success for future plans for special education to the business meeting, please say aye, raise your hand.
Sierra.
Yep, Cheryl's too. Great, thank you. Thank you.
I just want to just give further context. As you can see, this team just formulated in March, and they have done such an amazing job in such a short amount of time. So I'm extremely proud of where we are, but I'm more excited about where we're going. Just want to thank you all for your attention this evening, and thank you very much.
Well, with that being said, I am so in awe of all the information that we received tonight, the energy behind all of your presentations. And thank you to everybody. I know it's been a very long night and all the hard work. We do see what you're doing, and all our children in Norwalk should, are in good hands, and I'll say that. And our last item on the agenda is public comments. I don't know if there's anybody online that would like to speak.
If anybody online would like to speak, please raise your hand.
Can I ask a question?
How many, is this an okay time to ask this question? How many people are on Zoom and how many people are watching the meeting on YouTube? Because there always seems to be, questions and information's not getting out and whatever. And I'm gonna ask again, who do we have on Zoom and who do we have on YouTube?
So.
Tell me you got about 300 people, right?
Yes, no. Well, usually what we do is we get a lot of hits afterwards.
Okay.
That people go back to this.
Okay.
Currently, we have about 11 people watching on Zoom right now. And out of the list that you're seeing here, the participants, Shireen is the one because Lori is our note taker from Telesco. And it seems like one of our interpreters got bumped into an attendee, so.
Thank you.
All right, with that being the last question, I'm assuming, I need a motion to adjourn. Okay. Sherry, seconded by Godfrey. Thank you very much. Time is now 9:35 and everybody be home safe and have a good evening.
Thank you.